Welcome to the second episode of BrandVertising. I'm Don Norris, and I'm hosting this weekly, bi-weekly really, 30-minute show that talks about the world of BrandVertising and advertising. Really talks about the world of branding and advertising. If you watched the first episode, I had a gentleman on called Rico DiGiovanni from Spider Marketing, and we talked about the world of brand activation. And that was really important for me because I realized that a lot of clients and a lot of marketers don't activate their brands as fully as they could. And some of them I don't even think really understand how important brand activation is, getting the brand out into the hands of people, getting them to smell it, touch it, really connecting with the community beyond the screen environment that we're so much dominated by today. Now today I want to deal with a really important area as well. That is the world of social media. We've had brand activation, which is driving and growing, and a lot of marketers are really realizing how important it's become. And social media is probably the other area that everyone's really starting to see if they can get a handle on it. And I think that's the key point. Can we get a handle on social media? There's so much new technology, so many new agencies, so many new consultants, so many different people that are talking about it. But really, in my mind, there's only a few that really get it to the level that they're really adding value to the noise that's already out there. So today, we're going to talk with a lady that I used to work with when I was back in the agency business in China, a lady named Jane Price. And Jane is now a consultant, but prior to leaving the industry world to be a consultant, she ran the social media focus of the Intel Corporation. And I worked with Jane from about 2005 to 2006, and we're now going to have her on a little later on to talk about social media from the perspective of a client or a marketer or an organization. As I said, there's a lot of people out there that are giving advice, some good, some bad, but I haven't heard too many marketers or organizations sharing their points of view on it. How have they interpreted it? How have they introduced it to the organization? What rules of engagement have they brought to play? So I'm really excited to talk to Jane and get her point of view on how social media was introduced to the Intel world and how she's now working with it with some of her clients. Now, social media to me is important for two reasons. I look at it as it's really a non-negotiable issue that most clients should be online using social media to gain insights about their industry, about their issues, and what consumers and communities are saying about their brand. Sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a not so good way. But either way, you as a marketer or an organization need to know what's being said. So the opportunity to tap into blogs, to websites, to what consumers are saying or communities are saying about your organization exists. And you should be adding that to how you're using quantitative and qualitative research to really get a picture of where does your brand stand, what are the issues it needs to face to grow. The second leg of it is once you've done all that insight work and understand what's happening and what communities are saying about your products and services, is then to decide, how do I engage? How do I begin a dialogue with this community? And that's where it gets tricky. That's why I think, a real good discussion with Jane in a few moments about how do companies set the rules of engagement, what do you say, when do you say it, who says it, and how often should you say it? I'm a believer that you don't engage in a dialogue with the social community until you're ready to. In my mind, you're being invited into their social conversation, so you have to be relevant. If you're in there trying to sell like you are in traditional media, they'll cut you out. I believe you need to be giving them things of relevance, helping them grow their understanding of certain issues that they can then share with their networks. So the issue of social media to me is twofold. One is to use it as a great insight tool. The second is to use it to build relationships and the dialogue even deeper with consumers in a very comfortable format for them, which is that of being social with their communities. Now, before we get Jane on, I want to show a clip from an agency, a digital agency out of Lisbon in Portugal, that they sent out this year for their Christmas card. It was an amazing story of basically the birth of Christmas and how if social media was around in that time, how potentially it would have been used to get the story out. Now, it started as a Portuguese Christmas card, went viral overnight. They then made an English version, and maybe many of you have seen this around the Christmas holiday season. But I use a website called adsoftheworld.com, which is a fantastic resource for marketing content, marketing communications content. And every month they get people that are online to sort of vote on some of the materials. And this was voted the gold award for the month of December 2010, so I wanted to share it with you. And I think it really sets up nicely how social media has become a very powerful tool. So let's have a look at this, and when we come back, we'll have Jane Price, who is a marketing and social media consultant, formerly with Intel, setting their global standards on how they wanted to use social media. So we'll see you in a minute. Well, everyone, I'd like to welcome Jane Price. Jane, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you, Don.
Great. What do you think of that clip, Jane?
You know, I love that example because it's a great example of showing kind of the full range of social media capabilities and kind of bringing it to life in kind of a very unique, creative way that I think really did capture the imagination at a time, you know, Christmas time, and it went viral just like that.
Fantastic. Well, Jane, obviously you and I know each other well. Let's introduce you to the audience that's watching. I worked with Jane, as I mentioned, when I was the marketing head of the advertising agency, McCann Erickson in China, and Jane was, I first met her, actually, I believe, Jane, when you had an Asia-Pacific role, and we were actually involved in pitching the Intel business. And then eventually you moved on to running the entire marketing operation in China. When I left Canada and came back when I left China and came back to Canada to started Bamboo Strategy, Jane was the marketing director in China for a little while, and then she moved on up to this wonderful role of head of social media, where she was responsible for penetrating and introducing the idea of social media into Intel, how they used it, also set the standards, and involved yourself very much in the training of how people would involve and interact with Internet and the whole idea of social media within Intel. Before just doing that, Jane had a huge background, 25 years involved in the world of marketing, both on the technology side and working with consumer product companies as well. And in basically January 2010, Jane left Intel and opened up her own consultancy. And she's now a marketing consultant and a social media consultant as well, dealing with helping people, and she does as a coaching business as well. So Jane, welcome. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we get into this wonderful topic of social media?
No, thanks for the great introduction, Don. I do want to make a clarification. You know, when I worked at Intel, Intel had already been well into social media. And what they were looking for at the time was really looking at how to orchestrate the entire effort in a way that was more strategic and that helped meet the business and marketing objectives and help connect with the consumers in a more relevant way.
Fantastic. And that's actually one of the starting points I'd like to get at, Jane, is that maybe you might have heard in the intro, there's a lot of people out there giving advice on social media, consultants and agencies, and whether it's the domain of the public relation company or the ad agency or the direct agency. There's boutiques that focus only on social media. But I really don't hear too much from the actual marketer themselves, how they're dealing with it. And I don't think the industry and many of our viewers do either. And that's really the starting point. What interests me is you're there on the front lines and setting up some of these guidelines for one of the world's largest marketers of a technology product out of Intel. And what is your take on how the marketers in the industry is actually facing all this knowledge of this barrage of information they've been getting from outside consultants and agencies?
Well, probably the starting point with many of the organizations is one of feeling overwhelmed.
Exactly. And how, once they're overwhelmed, then where do they go from there?
Well, I think it's really back to basics, Don. You know, social media, if you really stop and think about it, it's really nothing more than basic word of mouth. And it's word of mouth now on steroids.
Right.
It's, you know, and you know, the technology capabilities have enabled that really valuable kind of commodity of word of mouth in a way that none of us would have ever envisioned. So collectively, how do we harness that very basic capability in a way that deepens and enriches the connections that we do have and form that dialogue from just a one-way dialogue that we've traditionally experienced from a marketing standpoint to the two-way? And so the agents, the marketers that then decide that they want to actually engage in social media, and that's a big strategic step first, is just deciding whether or not you're going to engage. What I end up, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and how did that decision happen? I mean, you were at Intel at the time when social media really took off. And how was the decision, who was involved in that decision? Where did the social media, whoever was responsible for it, I mean, obviously you were in the marketing department at the time. In other companies that you come across, does it always come out of the marketing department, or is there a decision how we get involved and how we play? Where is that sat within the organization?
You know, that's a great question, because when I was observing it across a variety of organizations, it really depends, I think, especially for some of the early adopter companies. I saw that they were starting to initiate social media basically where they had a big pain point. For example, if an organization had a pain point with their customer service, where they were having numerous black eyes with customer service, a lot of times the organization and customer service saw an opportunity to use social media in a new way in order to engage with their customers in either a more timely or more personal way to address their customer service issue. So you might have seen it pop up in customer service. Conversely, if the organization has had corporate communications issues or PR-related issues, sometimes you've seen that the PR team has been very proactive in starting up and becoming skilled in social. So you might see it pop up there.
And once it's popped up, where does it tend to land within an organization? So it may have popped up at a social, I mean, in the communication department or in the sales group. And then now that they're starting to play with it and work with it, and maybe there's this realization is, uh-oh, what have we bitten off here? We've entered into this dialogue, and it's out of control. We have to 24/7. We don't really know if we're skilled or trained to do it. Does it eventually end up in the marketing department, or does it stay in communications, or how do you feel that's working its way through?
Well, my experience is that it's typically ended up in the marketing group, and the second group that it ends up in is typically the corporate communications group or the PR group. And then those are the top two, and I think other research that I've seen also confirms that. And then the other organizations kind of customer service is also one that you sometimes see it in. But marketing is generally the place where it's found a home.
Fantastic. Now, Jane, I know you have this slide that I'd like to put up, which was sort of the 10 considerations that an enterprise might start to work itself through as it entertains the idea of moving into social media. And guys, maybe if we can put that slide up, Jane, you can sort of overview that slide, and we'll maybe talk to a few points as we work through the next few minutes here.
Sure. Well, these are some considerations or just some conversation starters of some of the key considerations that I've thought through as I've worked with clients and also had the experience at Intel. The first thing is strategy. While social media is a new medium, it really doesn't get anyone off the hook from really doing the basic strategic work of really thinking through, again, what are the business objectives that the company is facing? What are the marketing objectives that support that business objective? And then thinking about how social media uniquely offers a capability that's not serviced by any other marketing vehicle, and then starting from that point in terms of thinking about what could be the social media contribution in the whole marketing mix and communication mix. So strategy is key.
No, I think that's a good point. There's a lot of clients that I've come across myself where social media objectives, first off, there is no objectives. Let's just do it. Let's just get in there. Everyone else is doing it. We better get in there as well. And once they're in there, they realize that from a corporate objective point, the whole idea of how they interact with their customers or stakeholders, they haven't really thought that out. So they've all of a sudden have this power of social media driving their conversations with consumers, and they don't have a plan of how they really are going to then back that up. So I think understanding the role of strategy and how that fits with your social media strategy is critical. Completely agree.
Well, absolutely. And then the next thing that I encourage people to think through is really before jumping in, and I know there's a lot of pressure for people to feel like they've got to jump in and experiment, and I wholeheartedly believe in the experimentation approach, but it's experiment once you've thought through a few basic foundational pieces. And what I mean by foundational pieces is really thinking in terms of which group like marketing or which group within marketing is going to help orchestrate the basics of social media. It's like any group, like a musical group, you need a conductor.
Right, right. Now, I noticed one of the things at Intel, you introduced a training program and how everybody in the marketing and sales organization went through this and sort of raised their digital IQ. How was that accepted, and how well, after they went through the training, did you notice an improvement in how people interacted online?
Well, you'd be surprised, as you notice, things in the digital space are changing so rapidly, and then in particular in the social space, things are, just coming up. The evolution rate is very quick. And many people in the organization, not only at Intel, where it's a technology-based company, but other technology companies as well, many of the people in marketing and even in the product groups are not digital natives. That is, they haven't been brought up with some of the digital tools, and nor have they been brought up with some of the social media tools. And so for comfort and for confidence, at least at Intel, we decided that we would generate a series of online classes. And at the end of it, there were 60 classes online ranging across the whole sales and marketing funnel that, depending on your role in the sales and marketing organization, depending on your job, you were required to take anywhere from 2 to 8 classes during the course of a year at your choosing that would help you become more confident and more capable in the area of digital marketing of your choice.
And how did, I understand your group and you were behind developing that. How did you go about developing? Did you use outside sources to pick their brains, what's going on in the world, especially in social media? It's been moving so fast. And then internalize that to sort of an Intel mindset, or if someone's watching, you internalize that to whatever your company mindset is?
Well, I wish we could have, just from a sake of time management, I wish we could have totally outsourced it at the time. Right. But when we were looking for the capabilities, we really didn't see at that time that there were the capabilities that we could just go to some organization and say, can you provide us an online digital marketing educational tool? So at the end, we ended up developing it basically ourselves. And by working with partners, for example, we work with some of the agencies we work with to contribute classes and content. We did source at the time some courses from some of the external experts on content, and then sourced about a third of the content from internal experts on different topics. So it was a little bit of a mix, and we found that we had a model that was able to bring the classes to market in a very quick time to market, and frankly, a very low-cost option. And it was really surprising at how well accepted the whole content was, because we were offering people within the company information that they knew that they absolutely needed to have in order to be current and confident in their jobs.
Jane, I'd like to so we can move through it. Do we have that Brian Soulless wheel? If you can put that up, what do we call that wheel? There it is, Greg, the conversation prism. I can imagine when you put this in front of a lot of Intel staff or anybody out there with your organization, you put this wheel of how many different social media channels there are for different things, that their heads must start to spin. What was the reaction, Jane, when you walked them through? You want to get into this. This is how big it gets.
Yeah. Well, it can be pretty daunting, that's for sure. But I like the way this is actually simplified, because at the very center of it all, it starts with the brand and really being clear about the brand. And then it kind of works its way out, showing, for example, support, product, sales, marketing, PR, community, and crisis. And then it talks about, which of these various parts of the wheel actually contribute in which function that you're working in. For example, in support, different parts of these tools work better for support. For crisis management, for example, listening tools tend to work very well because you're able to, as you're highlighting in your intro, you're able to gather real-time insights. So it really, if you start at the beginning and then think about the function that you're working within, and then look at which of these capabilities support that function, that's a good place to start. And frankly, there's some leaders. There's a top one or two in most every single one of these. So it gets pretty simple pretty quickly.
Right. I also want to put up the slide that is from the Intel page, guys, if you can put that up. That sort of shows how, I know when you were there, this was introduced and really driven home since. But if you can go back, the Intel slide that shows basically how dominant and how sort of driven and built into the culture. Yeah, that's it. The guidelines of how you engage. How were those guidelines built? I'm sure many people are curious now. Hey, that's great, Jane. I mean, we got a strategy, but how do we start to build how we're going to engage and who's going to make those decisions?
Yeah, part of this was realizing that when we were starting to engage, we were often finding that we wanted to coach people in terms of, what were the more meaningful ways to engage with people. And people had questions of, do I say I'm with Intel? Do I not? What happens when someone talks about, talks about a competitor? Am I able to talk about a competitor? What if somebody's asking me about something that's outside of my realm of expertise? What do I do? And as we were experimenting and getting learnings in doing different types of social media, there were a whole list of types of things that came up. And we realized that if we wanted more people within the company to participate in social media, that we need to be clear on our expectations. And we, at Intel at the time, and I believe that's still the case, did want as many people as possible to participate in social media. But we wanted people to do that after they'd been trained, and actually after they knew what was expected of them. Right. And so this was the attempt to put down the basic expectations about, who should engage, how they would engage, and not only for the Intel population, but these guidelines are available publicly. If you go to the Intel.com website, it was thought to be important at the time to make it very explicit externally what the expectations of ourselves and what people could expect of the company when they participated in social media.
Fantastic. So, Jane, in your mind, what's sort of one of the foundations? If someone's watching this and they have a large business or a small business and they're thinking about getting involved, you touched on the strategy point, and we've got those 10 points. But there may be another one that's sort of which really jumps out. Like, if you got these 10 things, you make sure you do these one or two right.
Well, again, the strategy side is really key, because really knowing what you're trying to do and whom you're trying to do it with is essential. Because, if you're trying to build, for example, awareness, you're going to use a different set of tools than if you're trying to build deep fan engagement. So really being very clear, for example, on engagement and, in terms of your marketing objective. But I think in terms of what are the predominant tools that I typically see companies, regardless of their strategy, that they'll typically have a YouTube channel, they'll typically have a Facebook site, and they'll also typically have a microblogging capability like Twitter. And they're very keen on and very clear on what they use each one of them for and how do they engage with their customers through each one of those platforms.
Okay, I think that's right. And one of the things you also talked about was that around the basics? Does that sort of highlight what you wanted to point out?
Well, in the basics, this is one where, with the complexity that is inherent with this amount of moving parts in the marketing mix, I think what I've experienced is, with the advent of social media, it's a new media. It's not replaced totally an old media. There's still television. There's still print. There's still, radio. There's still a lot of other types of media, and there's still events, and there's still activation, retail. There's still a website presence. So you basically had everything you had before plus something new.
Right.
And so, the basics are, it's like, how do you manage this level of complexity? What does it mean for you in decision making? What does it mean for you as an organization in lead times? And really thinking through your basic approaches and processes for how do you get a creative idea from the start to the end point. And that's really some of the basics that I'm talking about. It's essential for you to plan for those things to make the communication timely. And how do you get a good idea that used to live in television? How do you get it to live all the way through the touch points as it moves through social media?
One of the things you also talked about is when you work with your clients now, and there's a couple sites that you often think are really good resources. So maybe if someone was watching once we're off in a few minutes, they're going, oh, where can I learn some more information? And there's a few sites that you've leaned on in the past that you think provide some really good insight in this topic.
This is one of the more richly researched topics. It's lovely. If you're really interested in digging into some of the basics of social media, there's no shortage of places to go these days. And based on my experience, some of the ones that I've heavily used, eMarketer, I like their capabilities in terms of looking at digital marketing in general, as well as some of their social media insights are really powerful. The other area that I like a lot is in the Marketing Leadership Council. If any of you have had the experience in working with their product, they are very strategic and work across a variety of industries, everything from packaged goods to, say, travel to financial services to technology. And they really put a very thoughtful product together in terms of looking at different parts of marketing as well as social media. And so that's a very powerful tool. And another one that's very practical and has a lot of free service as well in their basic membership is Marketing Profs. A lot of how-to classes, a lot of online seminars, and you go online. In fact, I was just online there yesterday and saw that they're offering a free social media planning kit for people that just sign up in their basic free membership.
Fantastic. I think that's really good value for people watching to see those points. And I'd like to end the discussion with the site that you want to talk about as well. And I think it's besides the Christmas viral card we showed with, probably one of the most talked about social media campaigns in the last year is the work that Whedon and Kennedy did for the Procter & Gamble brand, Old Spice. And sort of what is your take on why is that such an amazing example and why was it so successful?
Well, I love that one because it is such a strong connection to business results. They had such a powerful campaign with that very attractive man. Right. But it was such a strong idea, and they brought that idea so well to life in social. They extended it so nicely to the variety of Facebook through Twitter and YouTube. I mean, you can go on YouTube now and see that the various episodes, they're in the tens of millions of downloads. Think about the media value of a 30-second spot that has gotten 30 million downloads. But then I love it at the end as well, when they talk about since running that campaign, and in particular running the social part of the campaign, the impact on the business and the category, just phenomenal. But I just love the creative cohesiveness and the focus on the brand that they were able to bring through all the way through to social.
And the fact that it tied everything together, that social fit nicely, and it's to your point, there was an overall strategy. It wasn't just an add-on where, oh, this brand is such trouble, let's get out there and see, how can we do something online to push it up. They did follow it up with other pieces and promotions and packaging. It was a total well-thought-out program, as you would expect from a Procter & Gamble brand. Jane, we have hit the wall here. Is there anything you'd like to end with that you want to leave people with in terms of the first or second step if they're considering moving into social, or if they're in it and they're wondering how it's done?
Well, I'd say, definitely take the action to move into it. I think that even though I've said, stop and think about your business and think about the strategy, for the most part, if you think across the entire marketing mix, there are intersection points where social, you can make an event social, you can make PR social, you can make even product development social. There are aspects of basically any part of the marketing mix or the sales and marketing funnel that you can bring social elements to bear and do something very unique and very value-added for your business. So I'd say get involved, give it a try, have some clear measures, and experiment and learn from your experimentation.
And if anybody wants to get a hold of you to follow up this conversation, how would they best do that, Jane?
Why don't we take the social route? Follow me on Twitter. I'm J&A Price on Twitter.
Fantastic. Jane, thank you so much, and really good to connect with you again, and I know we'll stay in touch, and maybe we'll have you back on again as we continue to get in. I mean, there's one area that I know that we're going to talk about a lot of things on BrandVertising, but social media will continue to get up, and I think having your perspective, having lived it from the client side, from the organizational side, is so valuable, as we hear so much from suppliers and agencies and consultants. I think it's really important to understand what it's like when you're there on the inside trying to deal with what do we do with this new tool, and to understand how to drive that through the organization. So once again, Jane, thank you so much for taking the time to be on BrandVertising.
You bet. I look forward to seeing you again, Don.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye-bye now. Now, what I'd like to do is move to a clip of another example of how social media integrates really well with all other media. And I want to show a clip from an agency in Toronto that's called John Street. And this is an example of, it's a bit of a parody on how sometimes crazy the marketing communications world has gotten, and sometimes how sort of seriously we take ourselves. And really, one of the key drivers of marketing communication and branding is to provide a little bit of entertainment for customers and the stakeholders that involve themselves with brands. Because at the end of the day, I believe most marketing communications is driven by emotion. And if we tap into an emotion right, then it can be rationalized in many different ways. But it's the emotion that drives many decisions that are made by stakeholders and consumers and communities. So this clip is from John Street, and it's sort of a case study of an event they did, and social weaves its way through it along with many other traditional tools, including brand activation, funny enough. So have a look at that, and we'll come back and then close up this episode of BrandVertising.
In 2010, John Street took on one of its toughest challenges yet. Make Chelsea Badano's 8th birthday party a success in an already cluttered birthday market. Research showed that Chelsea liked the color pink and ponies, which gave us our big idea for the party: pink ponies. Next, we got the message out there with an integrated campaign of direct mail, out of home, and social media promoting the party. On top of that, we created early word-of-mouth buzz by targeting the 3 most popular kids from Chelsea's class and inviting them to a sleepover 1 week before the party. A strategy of snacks, movies, and Justin Bieber songs was used at the sleepover. We let the hype build from there. On the day of the party, balloons, decorations, and placemats with the pink pony theme were set up on the premises to reinforce a consistent design system. The theme was carried on to below-the-line executions such as cake decoration and even the family dog. But getting the audience to the party was only half the problem. The other half was keeping them there. New media as well as traditional techniques were implemented to keep our audience engaged. But to reinforce the core idea, we went a step further. Enter the mini pony. The results were astounding. The party immediately went viral with a ton of post-party coverage, both online and in traditional media. In the end, we didn't just create a birthday. We created a birthday movement.
Well, that's a fantastic example of sort of a case study parody and how everything comes together. And I think John Street's has done an amazing job with it, and hats off to them to have a great sense of humor. I want to thank everybody who's watched this episode of BrandVertising on FuseLogic TV. It was about social media, and it's such a big topic that there's no way we can do it justice in a 15 to 20-minute conversation with an expert in the field. And no doubt we'll talk about it more. But to me, I just want everyone to keep in mind, from my perspective, it's called social media. It's a conversation with people. Treat people with respect, just as if you're talking to them in a coffee shop or in a bar or a family around the dinner table. It's respect. Don't go crazy. Don't be an idiot. It's social media. Treat people like you're talking with them. You just happen to be talking with them with the aid of some fantastic internet and interactive tools. So, until then, this has been BrandVertising. I'm Don Norris. If you need to click into me or understand what I'm doing in between shows, my company's called Bamboo Strategy, and you can get a hold of me at bamboostrategy.com or dnorris@bamboostrategy.com. So until then, thank you for watching BrandVertising right here on FuseLogic TV. Bye-bye.